Every empire thinks they've figured it out. Every superpower believes they're the exception. And every single one discovers the same brutal truth. Economics doesn't care about your exceptionalism. There's a mathematical sequence, 7 stages. And once you hit stage 5, the ending is already written. Spain learned this. Britain learned this. The Soviet Union learned this in 900 days. The United States just completed stage 5. I'm going to show you something that should fundamentally change how you see the next decade. Not politics, not opinion, just the raw economics of how superpowers die, and why we're running the exact same playbook that has failed 3 times before. Let's start with a question nobody wants to answer. What actually kills an empire? Here's what they don't teach you in school. Empires don't fall because they get conquered. They fall because they go broke. Every collapse in modern history follows the same pattern. The empire overextends. They start spending more than they produce. They debase the currency to cover the gap. They borrow to pay the interest on the borrowing. And then one day, the math stops working. When that happens, everything unravels simultaneously. The currency collapses. The military can't be funded. The empire fractures. And it happens so fast that everyone asks the same question. How did nobody see this coming? They did see it coming. They just thought they were different. Spain thought their silver made them immune. Britain thought the empire was eternal. The Soviets thought communism had solved it. All 3 were wrong, for the exact same reason. Let me show you the pattern, and then let me show you why America is further along than you think. In 1492, Spain kicks off the Age of Exploration. Columbus reaches the Americas. Within decades, Spain controls the richest territories ever discovered. The Aztec Empire falls. The Inca Empire falls. Spain seizes silver mines in Potosi that would produce more wealth than any source in human history. By 1550, Spanish ships are transporting 200 tons of silver annually across the Atlantic. By 1600, it's over 400 tons per year. The Spanish real becomes the world's first global reserve currency. Spain has achieved what every empire dreams of. They control the money supply of the known world. This should have made them invincible. Instead, it destroyed them. Here's why. When King Philip II takes power in 1556, he inherits more wealth than any monarch in history. And he immediately starts spending it everywhere at once. Spain fights the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, France in Italy, Protestant rebels across the Netherlands, England on the seas. They maintain garrisons in the Philippines, across the Americas, throughout Europe. By 1580, they're fighting on 4 continents simultaneously. And here's the critical point. Half of all Spanish revenue goes to the military. Half. And it's still not enough. So Spain does what every empire does when reality exceeds the budget. They cheat. They start mixing copper into the silver coins. A coin stamped as pure silver might only be 50% silver, then 25%. The face value says one thing. The actual value is something else entirely. By 1600, Spanish silver coins barely contain any silver. Merchants across Europe start refusing them. Inflation explodes across the Spanish economy. But it gets worse. Spain is also borrowing, constantly. From Italian banks, German financiers, anyone who will lend. By 1557, just 20 years into Philip's reign, Spain declares bankruptcy. They default on everything. They restructure the debt, promise reforms, and immediately start borrowing again. They declare bankruptcy again in 1560, again in 1575, again in 1596. 4 sovereign defaults in 40 years. But here's the part that actually kills them. Spain stops producing anything. Think about it. If you control unlimited silver, why manufacture? Why farm? Why build? Just import everything. Spanish nobility starts viewing physical work as beneath them. The manufacturing sector withers. Agricultural output stagnates. All the silver from the Americas flows straight through Spain to pay for French wine, Italian silk, Dutch manufactured goods. Spain becomes a pipeline. Wealth flows through, but none of it sticks. By 1600, Spain produces almost nothing domestically. They're entirely dependent on imports, entirely dependent on silver to pay for everything. And then, the silver mines start depleting. Production drops. The imports continue. The system implodes. By 1640, Spain loses Portugal. By 1650, they lose the Netherlands, their wealthiest European territory. By 1700, the Spanish Empire is economically dead. Still large on a map, but producing nothing, controlling nothing, influencing nothing. Spain today is a nice place to vacation. That's the empire that once controlled half the world's wealth. Now watch Britain run the same playbook 300 years later. By 1900, Britain controls an empire so vast, the sun literally never sets on it. 1/4 of Earth's land surface, 400 million subjects. The pound sterling is the global reserve currency that every trade contract is written in. London is the financial capital of the world. Britain is the undisputed superpower. And just like Spain, they believe it's permanent. The pattern starts the same way. Military overextension. Britain has commitments across 6 continents: India, Africa, the Middle East, the Pacific, the Caribbean, China. Defending all of it is astronomically expensive. Then, in 1914, World War I breaks out. Britain faces a choice: stay neutral and preserve the empire, or fight and bankrupt themselves to win. They choose to fight. It costs them £7 billion. That's roughly $1 trillion in today's money. They borrow massively from the United States to pay for weapons, food, supplies. By 1918, Britain has transformed from the world's largest creditor nation to a debtor owing America billions. But they won. They kept the empire. They convinced themselves they can rebuild. They're wrong. The pound sterling is supposed to be backed by gold, but the war drained the gold reserves. They shipped half of it to America to pay for the war. In 1925, Britain tries to restore the pound to the pre-war gold standard value. Catastrophic mistake. The pound is overvalued. British exports become uncompetitive globally. Manufacturing collapses. Unemployment skyrockets. By 1931, Britain can't maintain it anymore. They abandon the gold standard. The pound loses 25% of its value overnight. The global reserve currency just admitted it lied about what it was worth. Then World War II happens. Another £120 billion in costs. More borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain owes more than their entire GDP. They won both wars, but they're financially destroyed. In 1947, they give up India, the crown jewel, the foundation of the empire for 200 years. Gone. Over the next 2 decades, they lose everything: Africa, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, the Caribbean. By 1970, the British Empire exists only in history books. The pound keeps collapsing. In 1940, £1 equals $4.03. By 1985, it's $1.30. Today, it's $1.27. Britain still has the trappings: permanent UN Security Council seat, nuclear weapons. But everyone knows the truth. They're a former power managing the decline. The empire never came back. Now let's look at the fastest collapse in modern history. After World War II, the Soviet Union emerges as a superpower. Nuclear arsenal, massive military, control over Eastern Europe. They're convinced they represent the future. For 45 years, they compete with America militarily. More tanks, more missiles, more troops. But the economy is dying underneath. The Soviets are spending 15 to 20% of GDP on the military, triple what America spends. They have to match American technology and reach with a fraction of the economic base. They're propping up Cuba, fighting in Afghanistan, supporting Syria, Vietnam, North Korea, Angola, Ethiopia. Everywhere America has influence, they have to counter it. The cost is unsustainable. By the 1970s, economic growth stops completely. Oil revenue keeps the government afloat, but nothing else functions. Factories produce inferior goods. Farms fail year after year. Technology falls decades behind the West. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union is importing grain. They have some of the best agricultural land on Earth, and they can't feed themselves. The ruble isn't a real currency. It can't be exchanged internationally. Even Soviet citizens prefer dollars when they can get them. The government has to pay for foreign goods with gold and oil because nobody wants rubles. Then, in 1985, oil prices crash. Gold reserves deplete. They're running out of real money. In 1989, the Berlin Wall falls. Eastern Europe leaves. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany, all gone within a year. The Soviet government can't stop it. They're broke. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union ceases to exist. 900 days from the Berlin Wall to complete dissolution. No war, no invasion, just economic implosion. A superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons collapsed because the economics stopped working. 3 empires, 3 collapses. Same pattern every time. And now let me show you where America is in that sequence. 750 military bases across 80 countries. Troops deployed in 150 nations. Committed to defending Europe through NATO. Defending Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. Fighting in the Middle East. Countering China. Countering Russia. $850 billion annual military budget. More than the next 10 countries combined. And we're still stretched too thin. If China moves on Taiwan while Russia tests NATO, while Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, we cannot respond to all 3 simultaneously. We're overextended, just like Spain, Britain, and the USSR before us. Stage 2. Currency debasement. 1971. Nixon ends dollar convertibility to gold. The dollar becomes pure fiat currency. Since 2000, the money supply has increased 400%. Since 2020 alone, we've created over $6 trillion in new currency. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. We're not mixing copper into silver coins anymore. We're just printing unlimited digital dollars. Different mechanism, identical result. Stage 3. The debt spiral. $36 trillion in federal debt. 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone are approaching $1 trillion annually. We're spending more servicing the debt than on defense. We ran an $1,800 billion deficit in 2024, during peacetime, with a growing economy. We're borrowing to pay interest on previous borrowing. That is the textbook definition of a debt spiral. Stage 4. Loss of productive capacity. America doesn't manufacture anymore. We design, we finance, we consume, we don't produce. The manufacturing base has been systematically dismantled, shipped to China, Mexico, Vietnam. We run an $800 billion annual trade deficit. We're dependent on foreign supply chains for medicine, electronics, steel, even military components. Just like Spain, we're dependent on imports while our currency flows out. And just like Spain, when that flow reverses, we're in serious trouble. Stage 5. Social decay. Trust in institutions, all-time lows. Crime, rising. Homelessness, exploding. 100,000 Americans dead annually from drug overdoses. Fertility rates, collapsing. Political dysfunction, total. We can't agree on anything, can't fix anything, can't build anything. 5 stages complete. The Soviet Union made it to stage 5 before total collapse. Britain made it to stage 5. Spain took longer, but the destination was the same. We're not at the end yet, but we're deep in the sequence. And then there are the final 2 stages nobody wants to talk about. Stage 6. Loss of reserve currency status. This is when allies diversify, when trade shifts to alternative currencies, when dollars come flooding back home because nobody needs to hold them anymore. We're already seeing the early signs. BRICS nations developing alternative payment systems. Central banks globally buying gold at record rates. China and Russia conducting trade in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia accepting yuan for oil. The cracks are forming in real time. And stage 7. Collapse. Not gradual decline. Sudden implosion. The Soviet Union. Superpower to non-existent in 900 days. Britain lost the empire in 20 years. Spain took longer, but the result was identical. When the reserve currency fails, when the debt becomes impossible, when the military can't be funded, it doesn't decline gracefully. It collapses fast and brutally. Here's why everyone thinks they're different. Spain thought their silver made them immune. Britain thought the empire was eternal. The Soviets thought they'd solved economics with central planning. All 3 were wrong. We're telling ourselves the same story right now. We're different. We have technology. We have Silicon Valley. We have the dollar. We're America. But the pattern doesn't care about exceptionalism. The pattern is mathematical. You cannot spend beyond your productive capacity forever. You cannot maintain empire without making things. You cannot debase your currency without consequences. And you cannot avoid stages 6 and 7 once you've completed stages 1 through 5. The sequence is locked. The only variable is timing. Maybe we have 10 years, maybe 5, maybe less. But the pattern says collapse is coming. And when it arrives, it won't be gradual. It'll be a currency crisis triggering a debt crisis, triggering a political crisis. Overnight, the superpower becomes a cautionary tale. And here's what should really concern you. Since 2020, we've accelerated every stage dramatically. Printed unprecedented amounts of money. Increased debt faster than ever. Extended military commitments globally. Hollowed out domestic production further. Fractured society deeper. We're not walking the path anymore. We're sprinting. Maybe America will do what Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union couldn't. Maybe we'll reform in time. Rebuild the productive base. Restore fiscal discipline. Maybe this time really is different. But the pattern says otherwise. The math says otherwise. And history, which has watched this exact sequence play out 3 times already, says we're about to learn the same lesson. The answers to what happens next aren't in the future. They're in the past. And the past is very clear about how this ends. If you want to understand what's coming and why, subscribe now. Because when we hit stages 6 and 7, you'll want to know exactly what happened and what it means for you.